I never thought a simple vacation could change my life forever. My name is Roma, and I was just a regular guy looking forward to a fun trip with my friends. We were heading to a beautiful lake house for the weekend, excited about swimming, fishing, and hanging out. As we drove down the winding road, trees whizzed by on both sides. The air got cooler and a thick fog started to roll in. It felt like we were entering another world. I remember thinking how spooky it looked, but I laughed it off. If only I had known what was waiting for us at that lake. Our car bumped along the dirt path and finally we saw it. A big old wooden house sitting right on the edge of the water. It looked kind of creepy, with its dark windows and weathered walls, but we were too excited to care. We all jumped out of the car, grabbing our bags and racing to check out our weekend home. Inside, the house was dusty and smelled like old books. Cobwebs hung in the corners and the floorboards creaked under our feet. But it had a cozy feel to it, like stepping back in time. We chose our rooms and started settling in, laughing and joking about ghost stories we could tell later that night. Little did I know, the real horror was waiting just outside, beneath the calm surface of the lake. Something ancient, something hungry, and something that had its eyes set on me from the moment we arrived. That first night, we sat around a crackling fire, roasting marshmallows and telling silly stories. The lake looked beautiful under the moonlight, all silvery and still. But something felt off. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Every now and then, I'd hear a splash in the water. My friend said it was probably just fish jumping, but it sounded bigger than that. And once, I swear I saw something move in the shadows at the edge of the lake. A pale shape like a person, but it disappeared so fast I thought I must have imagined it. As the night went on, the air got colder. A chilly breeze came off the lake, making us huddle closer to the fire. That's when we heard it, a soft, haunting song drifting across the water. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard, but it made my skin crawl at the same time. My friend Masha said it was just the wind, but I wasn't so sure. The melody seemed too perfect, too enchanting to be natural. I found myself wanting to get closer to the water to find out where the song was coming from, but something in the back of my mind warned me to stay away. As we headed back inside for bed, I took one last look at the lake. For a split second, I thought I saw a face in the water, pale and beautiful, with eyes that glowed in the darkness. I blinked, and it was gone. That night I dreamed of cold hands pulling me down into black water and a voice that whispered my name. The next morning I woke up feeling groggy and unsettled. My dreams had been filled with that haunting song and flashes of a pale face in the water. But in the bright sunlight it all seemed silly. I shook off the weird feelings and joined my friends for breakfast. We decided to explore the area around the lake. The woods were thick and green, with old trees that seemed to whisper as the wind rustled their leaves. As we walked along the shore, I spotted something half buried in the sand. Curious, I bent down to take a closer look. It was a necklace, old and tarnished. The chain was tangled with weeds, but the pendant was beautiful, a teardrop-shaped stone that seemed to glow with an inner light. Without thinking, I picked it up and slipped it into my pocket. I didn't know then that this simple act would seal my fate. As soon as I touched the necklace, the air around me seemed to grow colder. I heard that soft, eerie singing again, so faint I wasn't sure if it was real or just in my head. My friends didn't seem to notice anything strange, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. We continued our walk, but I kept glancing back at the lake. Once I could have sworn I saw a hand reach out of the water, pale fingers grasping at the air before sinking back down. But when I looked again, the surface was calm and still. I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination running wild, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. As the day went on, I couldn't stop thinking about the necklace in my pocket. It felt heavy, like it was pulling me towards the lake. Every time I got close to the water, I'd hear that haunting song again, louder and clearer than before. But none of my friends seemed to hear it. We decided to go for a swim in the afternoon. The water was cool and refreshing, but as soon as I dived in, something felt wrong. The lake seemed deeper than it should be, and the bottom was covered in strange, reaching plants that brushed against my legs like fingers. As I swam, I felt something grab my ankle. I panicked, thrashing in the water and gasping for air. But when I looked down, there was nothing there. My friends laughed, thinking I was playing a joke, but the fear I felt was real. That night, I couldn't sleep. The necklace seemed to glow in the dark, pulsing like a heartbeat. And outside my window, I kept seeing flashes of movement in the lake. A pale arm, a swish of long hair, eyes gleaming in the moonlight. I wanted to tell my friends, but I was afraid they'd think I was going crazy. As I lay in bed, wide awake, I heard a voice calling my name. It was coming from the lake, soft and sweet, but with an edge that made my blood run cold. "Roma," it whispered. "Come to me, Roma. I've been waiting for you for so long." I tossed and turned all night, the voice from the lake echoing in my head. As the clock struck midnight, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to see what was out there. Quietly, so I wouldn't wake my friends, I slipped out of bed and crept downstairs. The night was cold and misty as I stepped outside. The moon hung low over the lake, casting an eerie glow on the water. That's when I saw her. A figure standing at the edge of the lake, pale and beautiful in the moonlight. Her long, dark hair floated around her as if she were underwater, even though she stood on dry land. My heart pounded as I walked closer. She smiled at me, and I felt a strange mix of fear and attraction. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice shaking. "I am Rusalka," she said, her voice like music. "I've been waiting for you, Roma. You found my necklace. Now we can be together forever." As she reached out to me, I saw her fingers were webbed like a frog's. I wanted to run, but I couldn't move. She was so beautiful, so hypnotic. I took a step towards her, then another. The cold water lapped at my feet, but I barely noticed. Suddenly, a shout broke the spell. "Roma, get away from the water!" It was my friend Masha standing on the porch. In that moment of distraction, I blinked, and Rusalka was gone. Only ripples on the lake's surface showed where she had been. The next morning, I tried to convince myself it had all been a dream, but the necklace was still in my pocket, and Masha looked at me with worried eyes over breakfast. "Roma," she said quietly when the others weren't listening. "My grandmother used to tell stories about this lake. She said it was haunted by a Rusalka, a water spirit that lures men to their doom. I think you might be in danger." I laughed it off, but inside I felt cold. I remembered Rusalka's beautiful face, her hypnotic voice. Part of me wanted to see her again, even though I knew it was dangerous. As we hiked in the woods that day, I kept feeling like we were being watched. Twigs snapped behind us when no one was there, and once I saw a pale face peering at me from behind a tree, but it vanished when I looked directly at it. That afternoon, as we swam in the lake, I dove deep underwater. In the murky depths, I thought I saw the ruins of an old village, with decaying houses and a church spire reaching up towards the surface. But that was impossible. There couldn't be a whole village under the lake, could there? When I surfaced, gasping for air, I saw her again, Rusalka, watching me from the far shore. She raised her hand, beckoning to me. Without thinking, I started swimming towards her. My friends' voices seemed far away as I struck out for the other side of the lake. I don't know how long I swam. The lake seemed to stretch on forever, and Rusalka always stayed just out of reach. My arms grew tired, my legs felt like lead. But still I kept going, drawn by her haunting song. Suddenly something grabbed my leg, pulling me under. I thrashed and kicked, but whatever had me was strong. As water filled my lungs, I saw Rusalka's face in front of me, no longer beautiful but terrifying. Her eyes glowing green, her mouth full of sharp teeth. Just as I thought it was all over, hands grabbed me, pulling me up. It was my friends, dragging me into their boat. As I coughed up water, I saw Rusalka watching from the waves, her eyes full of anger and hunger. "What were you thinking?" Masha cried, wrapping me in a towel. "You almost drowned!" I couldn't explain. How could I tell them about Rusalka, about the village under the lake? They'd think I was crazy. But as we headed back to shore, I knew one thing for certain. I had to find out the truth about this lake before it was too late. That evening, still shaken from my near drowning, I convinced my friends to go into the nearby village. I had to know more about the lake and its dark history. We found an old cafe where locals gathered. As we sipped hot tea, I asked the elderly owner about the lake. His face grew serious. "That lake is cursed," he said in a low voice. "Long ago there was a village there. A beautiful girl lived in that village, engaged to be married, but her fiancé betrayed her, and in her grief and anger she drowned herself in the lake." The old man leaned closer. "They say her spirit became a Rusalka, a water demon that lures young men to their deaths. When the dam was built and the valley flooded, the whole village was swallowed up. But the Rusalka remained, always hunting, always hungry." As he spoke, I felt the necklace grow cold in my pocket. I realized with a chill that it must have belonged to the girl who became Rusalka. By taking it, had I somehow bound myself to her? My friends laughed off the story as an old superstition, but I knew better. I had seen Rusalka with my own eyes, felt her power pulling me into the depths, and now I understood. She wasn't just haunting the lake. She was looking for someone to take the place of the lover who betrayed her. That night, sleep eluded me once again. The old man's story kept replaying in my mind, mixing with memories of Rusalka's haunting voice and hypnotic gaze. The necklace seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy, and I could swear I heard whispers coming from it. Unable to bear it any longer, I crept out of bed and made my way to the bathroom. I splashed cold water on my face, trying to clear my head, but when I looked up into the mirror, I gasped in horror. Behind my reflection, I saw Rusalka, her long, dark hair floating around her pale face. "Come to me, Roma," she whispered, her voice echoing in my mind. "We belong together." I spun around, but the bathroom was empty. My heart racing, I stumbled back to my room. As I passed by the window, I froze. There, standing on the surface of the lake as if it were solid ground, was Rusalka. She raised her hand, beckoning to me. I pressed my palms against my eyes, willing the vision to disappear. When I looked again, she was gone, but the pull towards the lake was stronger than ever. The next morning, I woke up exhausted and on edge. My friends noticed my state and suggested we take it easy for the day. While they lounged around the house, I decided to explore a bit more. In the attic, covered in dust and cobwebs, I found an old trunk. Inside was a leather-bound diary, its pages yellow with age. The name inscribed on the first page made my blood run cold. Maria Petrova, dated 1954. With trembling hands, I began to read. Maria wrote about her life in the village, her joy at becoming engaged to a man named Nikolai. But as I read on, the entries grew darker. Nikolai had begun to change, becoming distant and cold. Maria suspected he was seeing another woman. The final entry chilled me to the bone. "If I cannot have Nikolai in life, I will have him in death. The lake calls to me. It promises peace and revenge." I realized with a start that this must be Rusalka's diary, written when she was still human, before she became the creature that now haunted the lake. And the necklace in my pocket. It must have been her engagement gift from Nikolai. Clutching the diary, I raced downstairs to share my discovery with my friends. But as I burst into the living room, I stopped short. They were all there, sitting silently, staring at me with blank eyes. "Guys," I said nervously, "what's going on?" Masha stood up slowly, but her movements were stiff, unnatural. When she spoke, it wasn't her voice that came out, but Rusalka's. "Why do you resist, Roma?" she said through Masha's mouth. "Don't you see? I've chosen you. You will take Nikolai's place and we will be together forever." I backed away in horror as my other friends rose, all moving like puppets, all speaking with Rusalka's voice. "The lake is waiting," they said in unison. "Come to the lake, Roma." I turned and ran, my heart pounding. Behind me I could hear my friends, or the things controlling them, giving chase. I had to find a way to break Rusalka's hold, not just on me, but on this whole cursed place. I burst out of the house, the cool air hitting my face as I sprinted towards the woods. I could hear my possessed friends behind me, their footsteps unnaturally in sync, Rusalka's voice calling out from all of them. The trees whipped past me as I ran deeper into the forest, branches scratching my arms and face. I had no plan, no idea where I was going. All I knew was that I had to get away from the lake, away from Rusalka's influence. But no matter how far I ran, I could still hear her song on the wind, still feel the pull of the necklace in my pocket. It was like there was an invisible thread connecting me to the lake, and the further I got, the more it hurt. Suddenly, I burst into a clearing and skidded to a stop. There, in the middle of the forest, was a small pond, and rising from its center was Rusalka, her eyes glowing with an eerie green light. "You cannot escape me, Roma," she said, her voice both beautiful and terrifying. "The lake is everywhere. I am everywhere." As she reached out her pale, webbed hands towards me, I realized with growing dread that running was useless. To break free from Rusalka's curse, I would have to face her head-on. My heart pounded as I stood face to face with Rusalka. Her ethereal beauty was mesmerizing, but I could see the malevolence behind her eyes. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I knew I had to do. "Maria," I said, using her human name, "I know your story. I found your diary." For a moment, surprise flickered across her face. Then her expression hardened. "That girl is dead," she hissed. "I am Rusalka now." I shook my head, taking a cautious step forward. "No, Maria is still in there. You were betrayed, hurt, but this isn't the answer." "Silence!" she shrieked, the water in the pond churning around her. "You know nothing of my pain." "I know Nikolai hurt you," I pressed on, my voice shaking. "But punishing innocent people won't change that. You've been trapped here for so long, Maria. Don't you want to be free?" For a moment I saw a flicker of humanity in her eyes, but then it was gone, replaced by cold fury. "I will be free," she snarled, "when you take his place." She lunged at me, her hands morphing into claws. I stumbled backward, narrowly avoiding her grasp. As I fell, the necklace flew out of my pocket, landing in the grass between us. Time seemed to slow as the necklace hit the ground. Rusalka froze, her eyes fixed on the glinting pendant. In that moment, I saw not a terrifying water spirit, but a heartbroken young woman, forever bound to the symbol of her lost love. "Maria," I said softly, "this necklace has kept you tied to your pain for decades, but you can choose to let it go. You can choose to be free." Her form flickered, switching between the beautiful Rusalka and the simple village girl she once was. "Free?" she whispered, her voice small and human. I nodded, slowly standing up. "The past is gone, Maria. Nikolai is gone, but you don't have to suffer forever. You can rest now." Tears began to fall from her eyes, each one hitting the ground and blooming into a small water lily. She reached out, her hand trembling, hovering over the necklace. "But I'm so alone," she whimpered. "You're not alone," I said gently. "Your family, your friends from the village, they're waiting for you. You can join them now." Her hand closed around the necklace. As she lifted it, her form began to glow with a soft, warm light. The anger and pain melted from her face, replaced by a look of peace. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice fading. "Thank you for setting me free." In a flash of light, Maria, Rusalka, was gone. The necklace fell to the ground, now just an ordinary piece of jewelry. In the distance, I heard my friends calling my name, their voices normal once again. As I made my way back to the house, I felt like I was waking from a long, strange dream. My friends rushed to meet me, confused and worried. They had no memory of being possessed, only a vague feeling that something wasn't right. I told them everything, about Rusalka, the diary, and our final confrontation. At first, they looked at me like I was crazy, but then Masha spoke up, describing dreams she'd had of a crying woman in the lake. Slowly, the others began to remember too. Flashes of cold water, a haunting song, a feeling of being pulled towards the lake. We decided to cut our trip short, packing up our things in a hurry. But before we left, I had one last thing to do. I took the necklace and Maria's diary to the edge of the lake. "Rest in peace, Maria," I said softly, tossing both items into the water. They sank quickly, disappearing into the depths. As they vanished, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The drive home was quiet, all of us lost in our thoughts. I knew that none of us would ever forget our experience at the lake, but as we got further away, the memories began to feel less like a nightmare and more like a sad, strange story. I've never been back to that lake, but sometimes on quiet nights I think I can hear a faint, beautiful song on the wind. Not a song of sorrow or revenge anymore, but one of peace and release. And I smile knowing that Maria has finally found her rest.